On this episode of the Layover Live, Paul Jewkes stops by to talk about marketing during a recession. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 194 of the Layover Live. I'm Jason Swick, VP of Strategy and Insights, and Happy New Year to all of you, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. We really do appreciate it. Now, we are post-holidays and the new year is upon us, which is normally a time where we take a breath, put our working boots back on, and focus on what lies ahead moving into the coming year. That said, heading into 2023, it's hard to be optimistic about macroeconomic conditions right now. The GDP forecast is expected to be down for at least the first half of the year, and with it comes inflation, which is really starting to be felt in certain areas of the economy, like food and entertainment. I mean, just go into a grocery store nowadays and you'll certainly see it. Now, travel is a resilient industry, and we proved that during the pandemic, but typically it's not a recession-proof one. So you're likely going to be working against an undercurrent of performance pressure that can bring on stress and anxiety. But the good news is we're here to help, and the outlook isn't all that bad. In fact, some of the recent data coming from the U.S. Travel Association by way of Adam Sachs and our friends at Tourism Economics shows some silver linings. So I'd like to encourage you to dig into that deeper when you have some time, but regardless, you're certainly going to want to be mindful of this changing economy and avoid mistakes along the way as things begin to play out. To discuss this in more detail, I'm joined today by Paul Jewkes, Digital Strategist at SimpleView. So Paul, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited not to only be at SimpleView, but to be part of the strategic team, to be part of great thinkers like you and others that have been on this Layover Live podcast. So
yeah, appreciate it. And I didn't pay you to say that. So, I know you've been at SimpleView now for coming up on a year and kind of been more behind the scenes on that side, but you have a vast background in the travel and tourism space. I'm so happy to have you now on the digital strategy side, man, where you're I think a lot of folks will get to know you and all the expertise that you bring. But how about a little background, Paul, for folks out there just don't know you?
Yeah. So it's actually really interesting that I'm helping present this episode today. And Jason, you didn't, I don't know that you knew this when you asked me on, but I got my first introduction to tourism in, drum roll please, the last recession.
Oh, hey, there we go. We're going back a ways.
Yeah.
You probably watched this, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So 2007 and 8,
yeah.
I was sitting in a model home at a resort in southern Utah as a real estate agent. Uh-huh. And if you can imagine, getting a real estate license in 2007 and 8 was probably the dumbest thing I could have done, but that's where I was. And I'm taking reservations left and right. They're coming in, and literally overnight, it all stopped. I don't know what the news was or what happened, but home lookers stopped coming. Deposits were refunded, and we just kind of sat there like, okay. And I was essentially out of a job as a real estate agent. Well, as the brokerage looked for ways to kind of expand and whatnot, I was the only one with some marketing in my background. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of started to delve in and help them find anyone that might be interested in finding a home at the time. Now you might be wondering, why am I talking about real estate career or all that? But that's really what launched me into becoming a tourism marketing director because I had to start looking. And as many professionals in 2007 and 8 had to kind of rethink what they were doing, I looked online. I found a job at what's now known as Greater Zion, but it's the Zion National Park Tourism Office in southern Utah. So I was hired on as the director of digital marketing there. Spent 5-6 years there. Moved over to a marketing agency, much smaller than SimpleView, but kind of the same idea. And then started running operations for Utah.com and did that for 6+ years. So all in all, I'm 15-20 years in the industry, and putting my feet to the fire, getting started in a recession, hopefully gives me some qualifications to kind of understand where we are, where we're going, and what's happening right now.
Yeah, it certainly does. And again, for a lot of folks that are probably watching this, probably haven't been through something like this before. So I'm super happy to have you on. Having the background that you've had, having gone through some of these experiences before, sharing your backstory is certainly appreciated there. So let's even jump into it a little bit too, Paul, and maybe let's talk a little bit about a recession overview, because again, a lot of folks probably haven't experienced what that is, as we've been, in such a bull market, I think, over the last, decade plus. So maybe a little overview and a little background on what this maybe means for the travel space.
Yeah, sure. So first off, I think it's probably wise to clear the air and say this isn't fear mongering, right? Like it's a recession. It's an economic cycle. It happens. We could all run for the hills, but that's just not the wise thing to do. So, like I recently heard Jeff Bezos say, right around Black Friday, don't go out and buy big, large items. Save, get ready. And, that might strike a little fear in my heart, personally. But I just had to take a step back and say, okay, let's look at this objectively. How do we do this, number one, personally, and number two, in our careers, and how we can help other DMOs navigate these waters if some of them haven't been through it, or if they have and they just need a second hand getting through it again. So secondly, no two downturns are alike. So I referenced 2008 a lot so far. We're not going to get a boilerplate template. This is how a recession works. These are the struggles you're going to have, and this is what you got to do to get out of it. But we can learn from that, right? And so I think there's three areas that we can be mindful of: cutting versus reducing, tailoring your tactics, and then focusing on your core audience. And we can dive into each of what those mean, but those probably categorize the best way to handle a recession in DMO and tourism marketing.
Yeah, I love that. Right, it's funny to hear your reference to Jeff Bezos saying don't go out and do these things when he was operating one of the largest companies that provided those sorts of things, which is pretty funny, right? But I do want to dive into these things because, and let's just take one even at a time, Paul, and let's talk about these areas that you're talking about to be mindful of. So let's start with number one on your list, which was cutting versus redoing. Can you or reducing rather? Can you get into that?
Yeah, sure. So as I saw as a realtor, anyone can thrive in a thriving market, right? Any realtor can survive when homes are flying off the shelf. But same thing with marketers. Any marketer can put up a billboard that says, hey, come do this really clever thing, and eyes are on it and they're willing to spend money, so wallets are open. But as DMOs look to cut versus reduce would be our suggestion. The marketing teams are kind of tasked with doing more for less, right? Every dollar is being scrutinized. Every analytics piece of data is being analyzed. And so we're just tasked with making that dollar stretch, going a little bit further. And so that's why we use the word cutting versus reducing. We don't think you should just, hey, we got to cut that budget. We got to cut that billboard. We got to cut that campaign. But just reduce maybe and focus on the bread and butter of your business, and focusing where those dollars go.
The travel industry got punched hardest in the gut during the pandemic. We all felt that. But coming out of that and coming back into travel, budgets are certainly going to be under more scrutiny, and absolutely with these macroeconomic conditions, they're going to be even under more scrutiny. So thinking of ways of not, to your point, like cutting versus reducing, but just being mindful of some of those areas and where you're making some of those changes, and keeping an eye, which kind of leads me, I think, into your next topic, or something to be mindful of rather, Paul, which is tailoring your tactics. This is where you got to, coming out of that cutting versus reducing, and really, how do we optimize and change things and tailor things for this new environment? So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So just like any market, a DMO needs to evolve, learn their consumption patterns, and fine-tune those strategies, right? So 4 spending habits to think about, and I recently read these online. I'd like to claim that they were my own, but I think these are really essential to ways to think about it. So, and these were marketed as, just regular consumer patterns, but we can tailor it obviously to travel, because I think, it's just the same. We all spend money or we don't. So the essential traveler, It's necessary for survival. It's perceived as central to well-being. So this could be business travel. You have to go on that trip. I personally believe, and I think a lot of us believe, that travel is good for your health. So getting away is essential. Travel could also be considered a treat. So indulgence, immediate purchases could be considered justifiable. So maybe this is a treat trip. I don't have to go, but I still want to. That's the way of thinking of that one. Postponables are trips that could just easily be put off, right? So maybe, for instance, in 2020, I had a guys trip plan. We were going to go, burn it up down on four-wheelers and have a great time. But COVID hit, and we just thought, it's probably best that we postpone this one. And we'll go again someday. We haven't yet, but we will. And then expendables, so these are perceived as unnecessary or unjustifiable. Like, these are trips that could just go away. And so if we see these four spending habits in travel and tourism, we can put the traveler into any one of these. And I think it's best for a DMO to look at, well, maybe my location or this type of trip is considered postponable or even expendable. How can I still reach that same person who was considering coming to my beach location, a surf trip with the guys, and maybe market to him and say, well, why don't you come here for business instead? So cater to him to get as an essential trip or a treat trip, but so it's not expendable anymore or postponable. And that would be a way to still capitalize on all those people, but just hit the right versions of why they want to travel.
Yeah, that's all really good. I love these, like taking these other four spending habits and making them fit for travel and tourism makes total sense to me, right? We have to just tailor and change things to fit the audience, right? Because it's not just like it's been the last few years where it's just money to burn and people are just doing things without giving much thought to those things. They're going to be more thoughtful in their approaches now, right? Is this essential? Is this something I can postpone? Is this just a treat? And they can be influenced, so you're gonna have to change your tactics and tailor those tactics. You've maybe heard me even talk in the past about the 70-20-10 rule, which again, not something I came up with, but something that we like to practice or advise clients on, which is 70% of your budget going towards those things are absolutely going to work, that are absolutely gonna be tactics or core channels that help your marketing, focusing the other 20% of your budget on those things that are complementary to that, right? So if you're doing paid search and SEO, maybe complementing that with CRO or video advertising, and then 10% on those moonshot ideas, right? Those things that are out of the box. And that's where we might want to pull things back a little bit more this time around and adjust that 70-20-10 rule as we're moving into the this new recessionary period, and maybe make it more of an 80-20, focusing 80 on those things that we know are working and 20% on the things that complement that, and maybe leave some of the moonshots out there for later on. So regardless, it comes down to then really understanding and knowing your core audience, which is this third thing that I want to get into. So maybe talk about your last thing to be mindful of on your list of three there, Paul, and that's focusing on your audience.
Yeah. So I use the word continue to focus on your core audience because you were always focusing on your core audience, right? Like if you weren't, that's probably something we should talk about. But it's interesting you said the word moonshot ideas, because I think a lot of times, that's what's fun about marketing, right? Like, you love to come up with that amazing idea, shoot for the moon, have it stick. And in a non-recession period, that's a lot easier to do. And you have the dollars, and nobody's really scrutinizing those decisions because now's the time to do it, right? Well, I think that being inside a box, like you said, you can think outside the box, but your box is just a little tighter. I think you can still go for that moonshot idea, but you need to be well equipped with the right spacesuit. We're not just throwing dollars around, right? But so still thinking creatively, still being a marketer, and using those gifts that you have as a marketer to figure out how to reach different audiences and whatnot. So one example I thought of, those who are familiar with Shark Tank, there was a business on there. I don't know, I can't remember, it was Waymo, but I think so. And they presented the idea that they were in town somewhere, and somebody from the office saw Lori, one of the sharks, Lori Greiner, walking around the city. and called the CEO immediately. Hey, so and so, I just saw Lori Greiner. We're going to be on Shark Tank soon. Let's hit our core audience. She is our core audience right now. So instead of, say, oh yeah, let's go hurry and throw up a billboard that she might see, or target her with a display out on her phone, he said, well, why don't we go shoot out 10 cars and have them just circle the block? And when he got on Shark Tank and he was presenting, she literally said, I see you guys everywhere. Yeah, I mean, what are you doing? And later on, he revealed that was part of the plan. He was marketing to his target audience, but I think that was a moonshot idea, right? It was just within certain safe boundaries. It didn't cost a ton. It was just a creative, inventive way to reach at that moment who his core audience was. So thinking about it that way as a DMO and discovering who your core audience is, hopefully creating those personas and changing them a little bit to target the right people.
Yeah, I love that example, Paul. That's and that is also tailoring your tactics, right? So again, coming out of the pandemic, we absolutely learned that we have to be more adaptable and flexible. That is a definition of being adaptable, is what you shared. Is like, hey, we got to, that's a guerrilla marketing tactic to be able to use. That's where we have to get savvy during times like this and make our dollars stretch. To your point, would it have made sense to go throw some marketing piece up somewhere? Maybe, but that would have cost money for a what if. By driving those things around the block and doing guerrilla tactics allowed you to get creative with your ideas and make your dollars stretch even further. So all really, really good examples there. So I love that. So it forces us to batten down the hatches and be more creative and be more innovative with what we're doing. So good marketers certainly come out of this. So I really want to ask you, just in maybe parting then, Paul, any advice that you'd like to share for destination marketers out there beyond, some of the three tactics or things to be mindful of that you shared already?
Sure. Yeah, I think I touched on it in my last point, but reclassifying or reassessing your key demographics. So right now, I think it's really easy, like in a non-recession period, to market to these personas like men over 40, or the middle-income adventurer, the high adventurer, the low adventurer, whatever you want to call them, right? And now you're going to market to kind of groups as spending habits instead. So rather than the middle-income adventurer, you're going to market to the slam on the brakes spending. You're going to market to the this hurts but will manage group. The still comfortable but well off group. Still uncomfortable and well off, I should say. And then there's the last group, I think, is the eat, drink, and be merry. They don't really care whether that's smart or not, whether they have a ton of money or not. They do just think that way, right? And they're just going to go on those trips anyway. And hey, it's no time to just sit on my pockets, right? So I think just taking those groups, looking at them, and reassessing who you want to market to instead of who, but how they're spending their money. So as a DMO, to look at that slam the brakes on spending family, maybe they're going to say, you know what, we can't afford that family vacation this year, but is there other ways to help them to get to the this hurts but will manage, or make it more essential, postponable, all those kind of things. And so just reclassifying, reassessing your demographics, and then, like you said, battening down the hatches on tried and true marketing, right? This is where we get back to the basics. This is where we get back to those moonshot ideas, but well within bounds, and not just throwing money all over the sky. So
yeah, sharpening the sword. Yeah, really, really good advice there. I agree with you. Thinking about those behaviors, because behavior is going to change. Things are going to be updated. You are going to certainly have those people out there that just don't care or not as affected by that for whatever reason, right? But certainly going to have to focus on those key behaviors. And I think overall, the key to success during a recession is what I mentioned before. You have to be adaptable and really focus on providing value to the end user. I think that's something really important. So it's time to think about, as a DMO, think about your value proposition. What are you offering that's going to provide value to the customers? Or in this case, your customers are potential travelers. So thinking about that, I think by avoiding some of these common mistakes that you had talked about, it helps you to be more effective, especially during these economic times. So Paul, really appreciate you coming on and sharing all that information with us today.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to be here and happy to be part of the SimpleView team and see all of these demos. If anyone wants to hear more wild stories about my real estate career in 2007, I'm happy to share how I ended up where I am. But as we all kind of work together through tougher times, I think it's still fairly easy to attract travelers and make the differences that we need to in our communities.
Yeah, could not agree more, buddy. Really, really, really appreciate it. And if you're not subscribed, please do so now. We're also available on podcast through Spotify and iTunes. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.